Hey there guys, so I'm back with another movie review. I know it's been a long time since I did one of these, it's been a couple of months now. So today I wanted to review a movie that came out about 8 years ago. I believe this movie came out in 2010, and I saw it not long after it came out. This movie, Harry Brown. Now, Harry Brown was directed by Daniel Barber, who you might remember as the same guy who directed 47 Ronin, which came out a couple of years ago. I didn't like that movie at all. But this movie, Harry Brown, which was one of his earlier movies, I have to say, and I'm just gonna start by saying it. This movie is a masterpiece. If you haven't seen this movie, if you like R-rated, gritty British action thrillers, British revenge thrillers, then you'll absolutely love this movie. This is actually one of my favorite movies, I have to say. It's a really, really good movie, really well directed, really well paced. And let's just get into it. So, as I mentioned, Harry Brown is a British R-rated revenge thriller starring Michael Caine, the legendary Michael Caine, in what, in my opinion, is probably his best performance as an actor. I think he was brilliant in this movie. He plays a battle-hardened, retired war veteran, a guy who was in the Marines for many years and has obviously been retired for many years. And his life is just falling apart. His wife has recently died. He's been in poor health. His community that he lives in a council estate in the middle of just one of the biggest shitholes in the UK. And it is just a crime-ridden, deprived, just an absolute horrible shithole that this guy lives in. And obviously, being a pensioner and a former soldier, he looks out his window every day and he thinks, I fought in the war as a soldier for my country, and this is how it turned out, and obviously that's obviously the cause of his depression. And yeah, his life is just falling apart before his eyes. Like I mentioned, his wife died. He's in poor health. He just spends all day in the pub. He doesn't know what to do, and ultimately something happens that really tips him over the edge. His best friend, who is an old guy like him. However, his best friend is a little bit different to him. He wasn't a soldier. He hasn't seen the kind of horrors in his life that Harry Brown has. His friend approaches him in a bar and tells him that he's been getting bullied and harassed by a local gang of youths. And this local gang, whereas they might just seem like a bunch of chavs, they're involved in something bigger. They're distributing heroin, they're distributing guns, knives, underage prostitutes. They're very heavy gangsters that nobody will touch because of their connections. And yeah, they've been bullying this old guy. He says, like, they've been putting dog shit through my letterbox, trying to set my house on fire, spitting in his face in the street, yelling insults to him, just really treating him like shit and making his life a living hell. And yeah, he says, look, I've been to the police, they did nothing about it, and he wants to take the law into his own hands. And ultimately, as he tries to take the law into his own hands, he ends up getting murdered. And that sets Harry Brown, who of course is a former soldier, that sets him on a revenge mission against these youths and against these gangs and against these criminals. And I've got to say that this movie, one of the things I love about it so much is how well paced it is. There's a long build up. There's a lot of scenes of Harry Brown, where he's at funerals and whatnot. People he knows are dying. Like I said, when he looks out the window, every time he looks out his window, he sees people getting mugged, sees people getting attacked, sees people getting carjacked, sees people getting stabbed, sees them getting robbed, and he sees people carrying guns too. And what he decides to do is, when he goes on this revenge mission, he decides to get himself a gun and starts hunting down one by one these criminals who he deems responsible for what happened to his friend and whatnot. And the movie, it has a very satisfying conclusion. I won't spoil the ending, but there's points in this movie that are quite moving. There's points in this movie that are quite sad. Like I said, it's R-rated and it's gritty, so there's a lot of violence in the movie, which I like. I like a movie that doesn't hold back on its violence, but it doesn't feel like it's forced. It's not a very it's not a very bloody movie. You know, it's not like a gore fest or anything like that. Yeah, there are people getting shot. There are people. You see a couple of people getting raped. You see a couple of stabbings. There's even a scene where like there's a woman walking her baby in the park in a pram, and some guy drives past her on a bike and shoots her. I mean, there's some real sick shit like that in the movie, but there's nothing gory. You know, it's more down to earth violence, if you know what I mean. It's like realistic violence that you would see if you lived in an area like that. And yeah, just the way that this movie is, the way that it's paced, the way that it's directed, it's beautifully directed. I think it's a really emotional movie. Um, what I like about it too, and although there isn't a whole lot of action in the movie, the action sequences that there are in the movie are actually really well choreographed and really well shot. You know, there's plenty of wide shots. For example, there's a scene where there's a shootout underneath this underpass, underneath this bridge, and it's kind of like a horror movie. Like you can't see where he is, but he's in the dark. But you know, he's picking off these guys one by one, and it's just a really a well done action sequence. You know, you can see what's going on. It's all filmed in a wide shot. And there's a scene with a shootout. It takes place in this like this crack den that he goes to visit to pick up a gun, and he ends up having to take out these two guys. And again, it's just a really well shot action sequence. You know, there's no shaky cam. There's no real close ups where you can't see what's going on like you see in the majority of modern day action films and modern day thrillers. There's none of that. This film feels down to earth. It feels realistic, and I got to say that the entire cast did a fantastic job. I mean, I really liked some of the characters, and I got to say the villains in this movie. I mean, the villains in this movie were fucking horrible, and I mean that in a good way. They were like really nasty, um, sadistic pieces of shit. Like these gangsters and these criminals with just, you know, these psychopaths with no morals whatsoever, who show their true colours at every turn, man. I mean, it was like there's a scene where I don't really even know how to describe it, but there's a scene where he's like I mentioned about where he's visiting the crack den and he's trying to buy a gun, and just the things that these people say, like he's got this underage prostitute on the couch and she's all drugged up and she's, you know, foaming at the mouth because of whatever's wrong with her, and he's like, I'll let you do whatever you want to her for 50 quid. And this old guy's just like, ugh, he can't believe what he's hearing. You could just see the shock in his eyes. I mean, there's a lot of shit like this in the movie. It really shows you the underclass and the of British society, just how fucked up some of these areas are. And if you've ever lived in an area like that, you'll have seen shit like that yourself, and you'll know. And yeah, I just think this is a really good movie. I really don't know what else to say about it, but it's a shame that this movie didn't really get that much hype. I mean, I remember I saw it, I think, about a year after it came out, something like that. I seen it on TV, but I think the movie did get a theatrical release briefly, and I think it did well financially, but it wasn't really, it didn't really have much of a following, as far as I know. I don't think it was that popular a movie. It certainly didn't do anywhere near as successful as some of Daniel Barber's other movies. I think that 47 Ronin was I mean, that movie was quite successful, made over 20 million at the box office, but that movie was fucking terrible. It was crap. Whereas this movie didn't make even a fraction of that. But yeah, I think that this movie was very underrated. I believe it had around 60% on Rotten Tomatoes, something like that, which is nowhere near high enough, because this movie is a heck of a lot better than any other British revenge thriller that I can think of. And I just think it was really well acted by Michael Caine. You know, he lended so much credibility to the role. Yeah, just a great movie. I would recommend it to anybody. If you like R-rated movies, if you like violent thrillers, if you like crime thrillers, if you like crime dramas, if you like you know, just movies that are a little bit on the darker side and deal with these type of issues. I mean, there was a few issues experienced in this movie. Like, I don't know whether it was their intention. The writers of this movie, I don't really know whether this was their intention, but one of the things that's really highlighted well in this movie is how useless and how powerless the British police system is, like the British justice system. Like, criminals, as long as they know the right people, they can get away with anything. I mean, it goes to show how what gun control in particular did to this country, because guns are a big theme in this movie, and guns are actually what saved the day. I mean, Harry Brown, when he's able to get himself a few guns, he's able to cleanse the community. But one thing that it highlights is, because back in the 80s or 90s, whenever it was, the government in this country took away everybody's guns and made it illegal to own a gun. What they did was, basically, they made it so that if you wanted to own a gun in this country, you have to be a criminal. So law-abiding citizens who follow the law and who just want to defend their homes and defend their businesses, defend their families, and defend their personal sovereignty are not able to do it. So the only people that you see, and I see this myself, without getting too controversial, I know people who own guns. Have I ever owned one myself? Well, I confess nothing, nor I deny nothing. Let's just leave it at that. But let's just say, I know for a fact, if I wanted to get a gun, I could. And let's just say that criminals are the only people I know who own them. So that's a big problem in this country, because if you're just a normal person, like a pensioner or a woman who wants to protect your personal sovereignty, or you want to protect your family, you can't do it in this country because you can't own a gun. You can't even carry a knife in this country. If you're a law-abiding citizen and you want to just carry a knife and you get pulled up, you go to prison or you face a fine. So that's one of the major issues that this movie, I think, highlights. And like I said, I don't really know if it was intentional, but it certainly highlighted it to me. It highlighted that the gun laws in this country and the self-defense laws in this country are a fucking joke. I mean, the police, there's a policewoman in this movie who wants to put Harry Brown away because he's killing these criminals and these chavs, and it's like, he's doing your job for you, and even one of the police officers in the movie, in one of the scenes with dialogue, says, look, the guy's doing us a favor. He's cleaning up the streets for us. This vigilante, he's not the bad guy here. And that's exactly what I was thinking watching it is, if you want to own a gun for your own personal safety, that I don't think that's a problem personally. But I mean, that's controversial. It really depends on your own personal views. But I think that was a theme that this movie certainly explored, whether it was intentional or not. So it's a fantastic movie. I know I'm waffling a bit. I would really recommend this film to anybody. I like doing these movie reviews. I actually enjoy reviewing older movies, because I think that nowadays a lot of movies are pretty poor. They're always full of agendas. This movie, I didn't feel that there was an agenda. I felt it was just a really fun, gritty revenge thriller. So let me know what you guys think, and thanks for watching.